Thank you for listening to REED-BBS.
REED-BBS. BBS. Gervonta Tank Davis versus Lamont Roach aftermath. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's start at the beginning with the fight itself. Lamont Roach was pressuring Tank from jump, mostly with feints and hard left jabs. Tank was observing, as I called it in my last Tank and Roach video, but you don't score observation. So you couldn't help but score the early rounds for Roach by virtue of activity. Tank was doing too much catching, and it became a typical Tank fight, doing next to nothing initially, literally giving away rounds, just giving rounds away. And that said, I was confident that he would turn it up at some point. I mean, he always does, right? But after 3 rounds, to me, it was all Roach. Again, one man was making a fight, the other man seemed to be avoiding one. Tank started complaining in the 4th, and Roach drilled him. Take yourself at all times, bruh. Somehow, Larry Hazard, who was doing the TV scorecard, he gave Tank 2 of the first 3 rounds. And Tank hadn't done anything to win, quote unquote, or warrant those rounds to me. While Roach, while admittedly wasn't doing anything special or spectacular, he was doing something. He was doing something versus the guy who was doing nothing. So who do you score that for? Tank's perpetual slow starts, it actually got me to wondering if it's a cardio thing with him, low key. Like, is he intentionally conserving energy for later? Can a brother not do shit early? Like, he can't do shit early, ever. Like, ever. First time I really noticed it or picked up on it was the Leo Santa Cruz fight. First fight I had Tank trailing in up until the inevitable highlight reel KO. I always thought this would cost Tank. I mean, he's done it against Rolly. He was trailing in that fight. Hell, he was trailing in his last fight against Frank Martin. It's become like Tank's party trick, and I've always thought it would cost him against a good enough fighter. And eventually it did. In fact, I'll even say because of that, it exposed Tank. He was finally in there with a slick enough yet smart enough fighter who was able to juggle that line between being just defensive enough yet more offensive than Tank. It was a good polished overall performance from Lamont Roach. And we can overthink and say, oh, Tank was downloading information. He was studying. He was observing. Bottom line is you're losing rounds. Not even decisively, but you're losing the rounds. And it's a very strange habit that Tank has had for a while. A knack that a fighter shouldn't have, quite frankly. Tanky got dirty and he gave Lamont a shoulder strike in a clinch. That's a clear sign he didn't like what was transpiring in the ring. That's a bully who's not having his way starting to break down mentally. Crying like a motherfucker to Steve Willis. Like you're in a fight, bruh. How about hitting him back instead of crying? Slowly, Tank was being chipped away at like a block of ice, just like bullies are. Now Tank took the 6th with left-hand counters that were starting to split through Roach's guard, his gloves and shit. There was some good body work from Tank. That was his best round up to that point, and it certainly wasn't all bad from Tank on this night. I don't want to represent that. There just wasn't enough of the good. Because Roach came right back with a good bounce-back round. I thought Roach was hanging in the pocket for a little bit too long, defiantly, trying to prove a point. But he was taking Tank's shots well. Even as more of Tank's left hands was landing. I still expected like the left hand of truth, Thor's left hand of some shit to land. And here I am still waiting almost a week after the fact. Roach, he was legit outfighting Tank on the inside and getting the better of exchanges. He simply was. And Roach, he rocked Tank in the fucking 8th round. He rocked him. Legit rocked him. Tank landed a shot and Roach immediately answered, almost like a catch and shoot shot. Then, of course, they show Hazard score again. He added 77-75, which was a bullshit card after 8 rounds. Tank was categorically not winning this fight after 8 rounds. He was getting outboxed, outpunched, outlanded, outworked, out-everythinged. He was getting out-everythinged by Lamont Roach, which proved to be the story of the fight. Of course, the 9th round, Tanky goes to a knee. We could call it knockdown gate, hair gate, grease gate, whatever you want to call it. Tank went to a knee after a light jab, walked to his corner to get his face wiped. Referee Steve Willis admonished him and may or may not have started, got to like the count of 1 or 2, and then he just stopped inexplicably. Again, whatever. Jab landed, Tank retreated, looked away, then took a knee, then walked to his corner to get his face wiped. By the letter of the law, that is a knockdown. And admittedly, it was a brief situation. It was just weird, like a huh? What the fuck type moment. The body language of a distracted motherfucker. Like Tank's body language was off, yet it clearly wasn't because of the punch per se. I'm not gonna misrepresent it and say, oh, he was hurt, oh my God. Like the knockdowns, quote unquote, that Virgil Hill had in the Boba Chew fight. Like those weren't the type of knockdowns that you dwell upon. They simply weren't. So I won't do it in Tank's case. But yeah, Steve Willis, he's a good referee. He just had a bad night, man. He got caught up a little bit. Again, it's not like Tank was hurt or knocked down per se. And since the ultimate verdict resulted in neither man losing, I'm not tripping on the knockdown, no knockdown. Or the hair grease, or the hairstyle. I ain't tripping on none of that. None of that. Knockdown gate, none of that shit. Hair grease. Although, there's been some funny ass videos and memes that have resulted from this. Really has been. But yeah, they need to rerun this shit and rerun it immediately, henceforth, forthwith, and indubitably. And all in all, it was a distracted, entitled performance from Gervonta Tank Davis, a man who was lucky. He was lucky to get a draw. There was borderline panic in the corner and shit. Tank yelling at Calvin, arguing between rounds. Tank was being all distant and standoffish with Calvin in the immediate aftermath. Tank's focus was clearly on some other shit. Retirement, this and that. He was elsewhere. And he relied on being the house fighter to retain his title. Kind of like Nature Boy Ric Flair in wrestling. He would get himself DQ'd intentionally to retain his title. That was Tank's vibe this night against Lamont Roach. When the house fighter gets the draw, it's because he really lost. It's really that simple. When the house fighter gets a draw, it's because he really lost. And just because Lamont Roach proved to be a capable world-class foe, which he did, Lamont Roach proved a lot of us wrong. Yours truly included. That doesn't mean he wasn't a cherry pick. This was absolutely a fucking cherry pick. It was a cherry pick gone bad. A cherry pick that went sour. That's what this was. Tank kept picking from the same batch of cherries. He finally picked a bad one. And knowing how messy Tank is with other fighters on social media, it's fucking hilarious seeing him get absolutely dragged all over, up and down every square inch of social media. Ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun. But yeah, man, immediate rematch. Tank saying he can't speak on when it will happen again. Nah, if you're the face of boxing, you fight who you want to fight when you want to fight. If you avoid this smoke, that's because you got too much of it last time and you don't think you can beat this guy. Which is why you haven't fought the Shakurs, the Teofimos, all the other bigger names in and around your weight class without some type of stipulation, because you don't really think you can beat these guys. The 30-year-old prospect, oldest of the bunch with the worst resume. Tank's rumored to be waiting on word of Loma's return. But Lamont Roach has earned the next seat at the table. Was it just off night for Tank? Or was he exposed? I think he was exposed. You tell me. You tell me. REED-BBS, BBS. Blackbird Sugar, Bachelor's in Boxing Studies. Television! We're at Sanford of the Fistic Arts. When all is said and done, there's nothing left to say